Andrew, as ever at this time of year, or back to this time of year as it wasn't, of course, last year, the anticipation's building, and that will be for you and all the team here as well. What is the sensation like as we approach the Epsom Classics each June?
It never fails to really get hold of you, I find, and the team would say the same. It's, I'm involved with some brilliant races through the year, but there is nothing that matches the anticipation, the build-up, the delivery ultimately of the Cazoo Derby, and we all feel that here at Epsom. Some years that build-up is easier than others. The weather is a huge factor in all of that, but it's fascinating just to see, from the start of particularly the turf flat season, these horses who you've sort of had your eye on, as 2-year-olds or when they're even entered as yearlings, sort of develop into Derby candidates, and to follow through the trial series and do mornings like this when some of them come here more often than not for the first time. It's just brilliant. It's the most wonderful race and the wonderful race meeting to be involved in.
Now, if I was talking to you soon around or thereafter from the opening meeting here of the season, the Blue Ribbon Trial, there hadn't been much rain about. But fast forward a month and it's a totally different story. I mean, how much rain have you had here over the last 3-4 weeks?
Well, April was the driest month basically I've ever recorded here. I mean, I've been Clerk here since 1996, and that was the driest April with barely a millimetre of rain. We had a bit of snow one morning, and that was it. Raced on goodish ground at the spring meeting via a bit of irrigation. But really, as you say, since May, almost since the 1st of May, it's been on and off rain to some degree most days. We've totalled to today, we're up to about 75 millimetres here in May, so about 3 inches of rain, which, I have to say, in the overall scheme of things, it's meant we've been working here horses on soft ground, but this place will turn very, very quickly with a little bit of dry weather, which looks very much as if that's what the next week to 10 days holds for us. So I've got no great fears, quite frankly, stood here, that we're going to be running the Derby on soft ground. I mean, I honestly think we'll probably be goodish ground here within about 4 or 5 days, so the early to middle part of next week. And I certainly struggle without any further rain around, which isn't really in the forecast at the moment. I can't see the meeting taking place at the moment on ground slower than good.
That's a really interesting point, because, to be honest with you, the horses that have come here today, albeit they haven't gone at racing pace, you can hear them getting through the ground. I mean, last night there must have been the better part of half an inch of rain that came down alone. What was the feeling from the jockeys and the connections about how it was riding anyway this morning?
Yeah, I mean, I think most people will have said soft, and certainly if we were racing here today, I'd undoubtedly have called this course soft. Yeah. But it's been taking that rain incredibly well. This is chalk based. You tip chalk about 4 or 5 inches into the soil here. You put a stick into the ground, and after about 4 or 5 inches, you're getting white tips on your stick in many places. So it's incredibly free draining and drying. So yes, it's ridden as soft, but just experience just tells us that we know what this place will be like for even a 3 or 4 period of dry weather. So it's taken the rain incredibly well. We've had 3 inches, but every time we've walked it in the last fortnight or so, we've sort of been feeling it, almost expecting it to be softer than it is. It really has been a sort of good to soft mix after each bout of rain. And yeah, we had 10 millimetres of rain here last night. It stopped at about midnight, so it's sort of wet on top, but it's not a deep soft. It's not a deep heavy. It's not approaching heavy. Let's put it that way.
And look, last year was an extreme circumstance, and we are still obviously having to adhere to protocol. But last year meant the Derby was run in July. It also meant the Derby and the Oaks were run on the same afternoon, which was incredible and it was unique. But I suppose you are just that little bit more satisfied. It's back to its traditional home, but it's also back to the configuration of the meeting as we know it now.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I think there was a huge and overriding satisfaction from the team here at Epsom Downs to stage a Derby and an Oaks last year. Yes, it was different, but this is a complicated venue with additional complications in terms of the nature and the land and what we can do here and what have you. So the overriding feeling was that it was just marvellous that, you know, the Derby took place at its rightful home, admittedly a month later. But it is great to be back to, you know, what current thinking is the right and correct format for the meeting. I mean, the question, well, obviously that was the first time in the history of both races last year that the Oaks and Derby had been run on the same day. And I know I think some people think that might be a way forward for the future. And I think, you know, we're always looking at things and ways of making the meeting better and right and what have you. But I think certainly our current thinking is that its setup is right.
Now, we're obviously not at full capacity, but the roadmap that we obviously hear about each and every time, as part of it, we are allowed a certain amount of supporters here. And that will just lift it a bit as well, won't there? Even if there's only a few thousand, just to have a few thousand live, real atmosphere sort of thing actually on Derby Day and Oaks Day, of course, will mean an awful lot more, won't it?
It will. It will feel, I mean, that was obviously one of the strangest elements of any race meeting that we've been running, you know, for the last sort of 14 months, you know, that complete lack of crowd and sort of silence as horses go around the parade ring. And you will notice that there is an audience here. It'll be respecting all the rules and protocols, but it will bring an element of buzz and atmosphere, undoubtedly, that really has been lacking.
And the last one from you personally, we talked about it beforehand, but I think everyone's got their own favourite Derby winner or meeting for personal reasons in a lot of ways. But you said you've been here since Charmit in the mid-90s. Of all of those that you've worked on, which is not necessarily which is the proudest because of the conditions on the day, but which do you think was the winner that exhilarated you the most of the Derby?
Well, I think obviously there's an element of having to you have to look back on these things somewhat in terms of how these horses have gone on and performed both as racehorses and indeed as stallions to a degree in answering that question. And I tend to answer it the same way, in that I never separate Galileo and See the Stars as my two favourite Derby winners. Galileo was pretty quick ground, actually. It was good to firm, in my view. You know, I was a bit anxious about it, I recall, the night before on Oaks night. You know, we had a bit of this, shall we irrigate, shall we not? We left it alone, and Galileo just sort of skipped round and loved it. See the Stars, different matter. Ground was fine, ground was good. I'd never seen such a laid-back horse to See the Stars in the preliminaries, which obviously was his nature, and he went and did exactly the same in the Coral Eclipse. But you know, having been here such a long time, it's as much with both of those horses, seeing what their progeny have gone on to do, and I find it just so satisfying that we know obviously Galileo's track record of is it 5-6 Derby winners, and See the Stars now with Harzand and Tagruda. And it just emphasises the lasting legacy of these great races, and so those would be my two.
And go on. And one last thing as well, with the Sandown hat on, that was another byproduct of last year. We weren't able to have a Derby winner even considered, or any 3-year-old for the Eclipse. So just to have that race back to its rightful clash of the generations is going to mean that much more as well, isn't it?
It will. You know, that was. There was obviously a lot of debate about that decision for last year's Coral Eclipse, and possibly one or two of the 3-year-olds might have gone there rather than run in the Derby, given the option. But that's the way it was agreed that we would do it. And you know, the Eclipse rightfully is that first clash of the generations, isn't it? And it will be great to get 3-year-olds back into it. And there's a very, very strong 3-year-old entry in this year's Coral Eclipse, and I just sense or wonder it might be a year for another 3-year-old winner.
Epsom first. Best of luck over the next week and a half. We'll look forward to it.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Andrew.